Deep in the vastness of space, where no sun shone and no planet orbited, a small listening station floated in the dark. It was a lonely place, manned by only a handful of people. Their job was simple: listen. They listened for signals, for messages, for anything unusual coming from the unknown corners of the galaxy. Lieutenant Daniel Reeves sat in front of a glowing console, his eyes half-lidded from boredom. It had been months since they had heard anything interesting. Most of the time, it was just static, background noise from distant stars. He stretched his arms and yawned. Then, suddenly, a soft beep sounded. Reeves blinked and leaned forward. The screen flickered, showing a transmission. Faint, broken, but real. His heart started to pound. "Commander Hale," he called. Commander Sarah Hale, the station's leader, walked in with a cup of coffee. She raised an eyebrow at his urgency. "What is it, Reeves?" "A signal, ma'am. A distress signal. It's not human." Hale's expression turned serious. She set the coffee down and stepped closer. "Play it." Reeves pressed a few buttons, and a distorted voice filled the room. The words were scrambled, mixed with static. But then, clear as day, one phrase cut through the noise. "Help us. Only humans can." Silence filled the station. The crew exchanged nervous glances. It wasn't just a distress call. It was a call for them. Hale straightened. "Trace the signal. I want to know where it came from." Reeves' fingers flew over the keyboard. "Got it. It's coming from the Alari sector. Their colony planet, Ilia 7. The Alari were an advanced but peaceful species. They had always kept to themselves, more interested in knowledge than war. For them to call for help, for human help, meant something was terribly wrong. Hale nodded sharply. "Send this to Fleet Command. Tell them we need a response team immediately." Within hours, the message reached the United Terran Coalition's High Command. The leaders of humanity did not take it lightly. A distress signal from a peaceful alien race was one thing. A message saying only humans could help was something else entirely. Admiral Jonathan Keene, a grizzled veteran of interstellar conflicts, stood before the council. His voice was firm. "We cannot ignore this. If the Alari are in trouble, we need to know why. And if an enemy is strong enough to make them ask for help, then we might be facing a threat unlike anything we've seen before." The council debated, but in the end, there was only one decision to make. A fleet was assembled. Not a war fleet. At least, not yet. It was a task force of scientists, diplomats, and a strong military escort in case of danger. Their mission was clear: go to Ilia 7, find out what had happened, and, if necessary, fight. Among the chosen was Captain Elias Carter, a seasoned officer known for keeping his cool under pressure. As he stood in the bridge of the U.S. Valkyrie, the lead ship of the fleet, he watched the stars ahead. "Set course for Ilia 7, he ordered. As the ship jumped into hyperspace, one question lingered in everyone's mind. Who, or what, had made the Alari so afraid? The fleet arrived at Ilia 7 after a tense journey through hyperspace. Captain Elias Carter stood at the bridge of the U.S. Valkyrie, staring at the planet on the main screen. It was a beautiful world, lush green forests, vast oceans, and towering mountains. From space, everything seemed normal. But there was no communication, no response to their hails. The Alari were silent. Carter turned to his second-in-command, Commander Julia Grant. Still nothing. Grant shook her head. "We've sent multiple signals. No reply. It's like the whole planet is empty." That was impossible. Ilia 7 was home to millions of Alari, cities, farms, research centers, one of their most advanced colonies. And yet, long-range scans detected no movement, no energy signatures, nothing. Carter took a deep breath. "Send in the recon team. I want answers." A small group of soldiers and scientists, led by Lieutenant Adam Rains, landed near the largest city. As they stepped onto the surface, a strange silence surrounded them. No sounds of wildlife, no hum of machines, just an eerie stillness. They moved cautiously through the empty streets. Tall silver buildings stood undamaged, their lights flickering weakly. Shops were still stocked with goods. Air transports sat untouched in their docks. It was as if everyone had simply vanished. "This isn't right," muttered Private Lee, gripping his rifle. Dr. Emily Vasquez, one of the scientists, scanned the area with her equipment. No life signs, no bodies, no sign of struggle. It made no sense. If there had been an attack, there would be destruction. Ruined buildings, burnt-out vehicles, remains of a battle. But there was nothing. The Alari were just gone. As they moved deeper into the city, they reached the main research facility. Its massive doors were half open, as if someone had left in a hurry. Inside, flickering screens displayed unread messages. Papers and data pads lay scattered across the floor. Rains picked up one of the data pads and activated it. A message appeared, written in the Alari language. The translation software kicked in, displaying the final words of a scientist. "They are coming. We were fools to believe we were safe. If anyone reads this, run." Rains swallowed hard. "Sir, we have a problem." Back on the Valkyrie, Carter listened to the report with a grim expression. "So we have no idea what happened. No bodies, no clues, just a warning." Dr. Vasquez nodded. "That's right, Captain. But there is one more thing. We found a hidden bunker beneath the research facility. Inside was an Alari child, the only survivor." Carter's eyes widened. "A child. Bring them aboard immediately." Minutes later, a medical team escorted the small, frightened Alari onto the ship. The child had large, silver eyes and glowing blue skin, a typical trait of their species. They looked around nervously, clutching the small device in their hands. Dr. Vasquez knelt beside them, speaking gently. "It's okay. You're safe now. Can you tell us what happened?" The child hesitated, then pressed a button on the device. A holographic image appeared, grainy, damaged, but terrifying. A fleet of dark, jagged ships descended upon Ilya 7. Strange figures moved through the streets, tall and mechanical, their eyes burning with red light. One by one, the Alari citizens collapsed, their bodies vanishing into nothingness. The child whispered in a trembling voice, "The Vorka." A chill ran through the room. Carter had never heard that name before, but he could feel the fear in the child's voice. "Who are they?" he asked. The child looked up, eyes wide with terror. "The end of everything." Carter turned to his crew. "Get this information to Fleet Command. We need to prepare. Whatever took the Alari, they could be coming for us next." And in the darkness of space, something moved. Watching. Waiting. The Vorka were not finished yet. The air inside the U.S. Valkyrie felt heavy, filled with a silent tension that pressed down on everyone. Captain Elias Carter stood in the briefing room, his gaze fixed on the holographic recording the Alari child had given them. The grainy footage replayed the terrifying scene. Dark, jagged ships descending, mechanical figures marching through the city. And then, nothing. The Alari had vanished without a trace. No bodies, no destruction. Just an eerie emptiness. Commander Julia Grant folded her arms. "We need to know more. What are we dealing with here?" Dr. Emily Vasquez, still kneeling beside the young Alari, spoke softly. "We have to be careful. The child is scared. If we push too hard, they might shut down completely." Carter nodded. He crouched down to the child's eye level. "Hey there," he said gently. "My name is Carter. You're safe now. Can you tell us anything more about the Vorka?" The child hesitated, gripping their small hands together. Finally, in a shaky voice, they whispered, "They come from the void. They take everything. They do not leave anything behind." A chill ran through the room. Carter exchanged a glance with Grant. "What do they want?" Grant asked. The child closed their eyes, as if recalling a painful memory. They do not speak. They do not ask. They only take. We tried to fight, but our weapons did nothing. Nothing. Rains, the lid soldier, frowned. You're saying they're invincible. The child nodded. Our strongest energy weapons, our defense shields, useless. They walked through fire like it was air. And when they touched someone, the child's voice dropped to a whisper. Gone. Just gone. The weight of those words sank in. If an advanced species like the Alari had fallen so easily, what chance did humanity have? Carter stood up. We need intel. Commander Grant, scan the system for any signs of Vorka activity. Rains, get your team ready. We're going back to the surface. Dr. Vasquez hesitated. Captain, we don't know how dangerous this enemy is. If they're still here, we have to take that risk. Carter interrupted. We need to understand what we're up against. Otherwise, we'll be fighting blind. An hour later, 2 shuttles descended back to Ilya 7. Rains and his soldiers moved cautiously through the ruined city. The silence was even heavier now, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Then one of the soldiers froze. Sir, I think I see something. They turned a corner, and there it was, a towering figure standing motionless in the middle of the street. The Vorka. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. 7 feet tall, its body was made of black metal with sharp, jagged edges. Its head was elongated, with glowing red eyes that burned like embers. It stood still, lifeless, almost like a statue. Rains raised his hand, signaling his team to hold position. Vasquez, are you seeing this? From the shuttle, Vasquez's voice crackled through the comms. Yes, I'm scanning it now, but I'm not detecting anything. No energy signature, no heat. It's like it's not even there. Cautiously, Rains stepped closer. His rifle was aimed, finger resting lightly on the trigger. The Vorka did not move. Maybe it's inactive, Private Lee suggested. But as soon as the words left his mouth, the creature's head snapped toward them. Its eyes flared brighter. Then it moved. Faster than anyone expected, the Vorka lunged forward, its arm extending unnaturally like a whip. Rains barely dodged in time. The creature's arm slammed into the ground, leaving a deep crater where he had been standing just seconds ago. Open fire, Rains shouted. Bullets and plasma rounds struck the creature, but as the Alari child had warned, nothing happened. The rounds hit its armor, but it didn't even flinch. Then the Vorka raised its other hand, and the air around it seemed to twist. Private Lee screamed. His body flickered, like a glitch in a broken video. Then, he was gone. Not dead, not disintegrated, just gone. Rain's heart pounded. Reat. Fall back to ve Ishutol. The soldiers ran as fast as they could, but the Vorka followed, moving with an unnatural grace. Another soldier disappeared, and then another. By the time Rains and the last survivor reached the shuttle, they were barely alive. The shuttle's doors slammed shut, and it lifted off. Through the window, Rains saw the Vorka standing below, watching them with those glowing red eyes. Waiting. Back on the Valkyrie, the mood was grim. They don't just kill, Rains said. His voice was hollow. They erase. Dr. Vasquez was pale. It's like they rewrite reality itself. Carter exhaled, his mind racing. We can't fight them. Not with normal weapons. Not like this. The room fell silent. The enemy was unlike anything humanity had ever faced before. But if the Vorka were still out there, still spreading, then humanity was in danger. The atmosphere on the U.S. Valkyrie was heavy with tension. The soldiers who had returned from Ilya 7 were still shaken. They had faced an enemy that couldn't be harmed, an enemy that could erase people from existence, as if they had never been there at all. Captain Elias Carter stood in the command center, his hands gripping the table as he looked at the holographic display. It showed the Vorka tall and motionless, standing in the ruins of the Alari city. Those glowing red eyes seemed to watch them even through the screen. Commander Julia Grant broke the silence. "Sir, we need to leave. We can't fight them." Carter didn't answer right away. He knew she was right. Every instinct told him to pull back, to warn the United Terran Coalition, to prepare defenses. But there was one problem. Running wouldn't stop the Vorka. "Where do we go?" Dr. Emily Vasquez asked. "We don't even know what they want. They don't speak. They don't negotiate. They just take," Carter said quietly. "If we leave, they'll follow." Rains, still pale from the mission, clenched his fists. "So what do we do, Captain? We can't fight them. We can't even touch them." The room fell silent. No one had an answer. Then a young Alari child, who had been sitting quietly in a corner, spoke. "There is a way." All eyes turned to them. Carter stepped closer, lowering himself to their level. "What do you mean?" The child hesitated, then held out a small glowing device. "My people, we knew the Vorka were coming. We tried to stop them. We failed. But we learned something." Carter carefully took the device. "What did you learn?" The child's silver eyes were filled with fear. "The Vorka are not invincible. There is something they fear." In the research lab, the crew gathered around as Dr. Vasquez activated the device. A complex hologram appeared, alien symbols, diagrams, and a glowing map of the galaxy. "It's some kind of record," Vasquez said. "The Alari must have been studying the Vorka before their colony fell." She adjusted the translation software, and suddenly, a voice spoke through the speakers, a recording from an Alari scientist. "The Vorka come from the void, a place outside our universe. They do not consume. They do not destroy. They erase. But even the void has limits. Even the Vorka have weaknesses." The crew listened in silence. "Long ago, the ancients, those who came before us, discovered a weapon. A technology that could seal the Vorka away. We do not know what it is, but there are records, lost among the ruins of their last stronghold. The planet." Static filled the recording. Then, finally, a name. Epsilon 9. The hologram flickered, showing a distant, dead world. Commander Grant frowned. "Epsilon 9. I've heard of it. It's in a restricted sector. No ships go near it. Because it's a graveyard," Rains muttered. "A dead world. No life, no atmosphere, just ruins." Carter exhaled. "Then that's where we're going." Grant stared at him. "Captain, that planet has been abandoned for centuries. If the answer was there, wouldn't someone have found it already?" "Maybe. Maybe not," Carter said. "But it's the only lead we have. If the Alari thought the ancients had a way to stop the Vorka, then we need to find it before it's too late." The fleet prepared for departure. Engines roared to life, and within minutes, the ships left Ilya 7 behind. As they entered hyperspace, Carter stood on the bridge, watching the stars streak past. "Sir," Grant said, approaching him, "what if we don't find anything? What if the planet is just a ruin?" Carter looked at her, his expression firm. "Then at least we tried. We can't just sit back and wait for the Vorka to come for us." Grant nodded, though worry still lingered in her eyes. Hours later, the fleet arrived at Epsilon 9. The planet was just as the records described, a dead world. Its surface was covered in dust and crumbling ruins. There was no atmosphere, no life, only the remains of a civilization long gone. The Valkyrie sent down landing teams. As Carter and his crew stepped onto the surface, a strange feeling washed over them. The ruins were massive, ancient structures made of black stone. Some of the walls still had carvings, symbols that no one could read. Dr. Vasquez scanned the area. "These ruins are over 100,000 years old. Whoever built them, they were here long before us." "Spread out," Carter ordered. "Find anything that might tell us what happened here." As they moved through the ruins, something caught Rain's attention. "Captain, over here." The team rushed over. Rains was standing before a massive doorway, half buried in the sand. Strange symbols glowed faintly on its surface. "This looks important," Vasquez said, running her hand over the stone. "It might be some kind of vault." Carter stepped forward. "Then let's open it." Vasquez studied the symbols. "It's some kind of lock. I think I can bypass it." She pulled out her equipment and started working. The seconds stretched into minutes. Then, click. The door trembled, ancient gears grinding as it slowly slid open. A rush of stale air escaped from within. Inside was darkness. And something else. A deep hum echoed from within the vault. Faint lights flickered in the distance. The team stepped inside cautiously, their weapons ready. And then, as if sensing their presence, the ancient structure came to life. Strange machines whirred. Symbols on the walls glowed brighter. And in the center of the chamber, something floated. A device, pulsing with energy, waiting for someone to claim it. Carter took a step forward. "I think we just found what we were looking for." But before anyone could move, the ground shook. "There is a way." All eyes turned to them. Carter stepped closer, lowering himself to their level. "What do you mean?" The child hesitated, then held out a small glowing device. "My people, we knew the Vorka were coming. We tried to stop them. We failed. But we learned something." Carter carefully took the device. "What did you learn?" The child's silver eyes were filled with fear. "The Vorka are not invincible. There is something they fear." In the research lab, the crew gathered around as Dr. Vasquez activated the device. A complex hologram appeared, alien symbols, diagrams, and a glowing map of the galaxy. "It's some kind of record," Vasquez said. "The Aelari must have been studying the Vorka before their colony fell." She adjusted the translation software, and suddenly, a voice spoke through the speakers, a recording from an Aelari scientist. "The Vorka come from the void, a place outside our universe. They do not consume. They do not destroy. They erase. But even the void has limits. Even the Vorka have weaknesses." The crew listened in silence. "Long ago, the ancients, those who came before us, discovered a weapon. A technology that could seal the Vorka away. We do not know what it is, but there are records, lost among the ruins of their last stronghold. The planet." Static filled the recording. Then, finally, a name. Epsilon 9. The hologram flickered, showing a distant, dead world. Commander Grant frowned. "Epsilon 9. I've heard of it. It's in a restricted sector. No ships go near it. Because it's a graveyard," Rains muttered. "A dead world. No life, no atmosphere, just ruins." Carter exhaled. "Then that's where we're going." Grant stared at him. "Captain, that planet has been abandoned for centuries. If the answer was there, wouldn't someone have found it already?" "Maybe. Maybe not," Carter said. "But it's the only lead we have. If the Aelari thought the ancients had a way to stop the Vorka, then we need to find it before it's too late." The fleet prepared for departure. Engines roared to life, and within minutes, the ships left Ilya 7 behind. As they entered hyperspace, Carter stood on the bridge, watching the stars streak past. "Sir," Grant said, approaching him, "what if we don't find anything? What if the planet is just a ruin?" Carter looked at her, his expression firm. "Then at least we tried. We can't just sit back and wait for the Vorka to come for us." Grant nodded, though worry still lingered in her eyes. Hours later, the fleet arrived at Epsilon 9. The planet was just as the records described. A dead world. Its surface was covered in dust and crumbling ruins. There was no atmosphere, no life, only the remains of a civilization long gone. The Valkyrie sent down landing teams. As Carter and his crew stepped onto the surface, a strange feeling washed over them. The ruins were massive, ancient structures made of black stone. Some of the walls still had carvings, symbols that no one could read. Dr. Vasquez scanned the area. "These ruins are over 100,000 years old. Whoever built them, they were here long before us. Spread out, Carter ordered. Find anything that might tell us what happened here. As they moved through the ruins, something caught Rain's attention. Captain, over here. The team rushed over. Rains was standing before a massive doorway, half buried in the sand. Strange symbols glowed faintly on its surface. This looks important, Vasquez said, running her hand over the stone. It might be some kind of vault. Carter stepped forward. Then let's open it. Vasquez studied the symbols. It's some kind of lock. I think I can bypass it. She pulled out her equipment and started working. The seconds stretched into minutes. Then, click. The door trembled, ancient gears grinding as it slowly slid open. A rush of stale air escaped from within. Inside was darkness. And something else. A deep hum echoed from within the vault. Faint lights flickered in the distance. The team stepped inside cautiously, their weapons ready. And then, as if sensing their presence, the ancient structure came to life. Strange machines whirred. Symbols on the walls glowed brighter. And in the center of the chamber, something floated. A device, pulsing with energy, waiting for someone to claim it. Carter took a step forward. I think we just found what we were looking for. But before anyone could move, the ground shook. A distant rumble echoed across the ruins. Outside, the sky darkened. Something was coming. Something that did not want them to find this weapon. And for the first time in centuries, Epsilon 9 was no longer silent. The ground trembled beneath their feet, sending dust and debris falling from the ancient ceiling. Captain Elias Carter tightened his grip on his rifle as the deep hum inside the vault grew louder. Something was waking up. Dr. Emily Vasquez stared at the floating device in the center of the chamber. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, an intricate metallic structure pulsing with golden energy, suspended in midair as if held by an invisible force. This must be it, she whispered. The weapon, or whatever the ancients left behind. Commander Julia Grant kept her eyes on the entrance, scanning for threats. If this thing is important, the Vorka won't let us take it without a fight. Carter stepped forward cautiously, his heart pounding. He reached out, hesitating for just a moment before grasping the device. The moment his fingers touched its surface, a shockwave of energy burst from it, rushing outward in a golden wave. The walls of the vault lit up with strange symbols, glowing brighter than before. Suddenly, a deep, booming voice echoed through the chamber. It was not a language they understood, yet somehow they felt the meaning in their minds. You have awakened the last hope, the final light. Vasquez's eyes widened. Did anyone else hear that? Rains nodded, his face pale. Loud and clear. Carter tightened his grip on the artifact. What is the final light? The voice spoke again, rumbling like thunder. A weapon of creation. A force against the void. Before they could ask more, the entire vault shook violently. Outside, the sky darkened further. An unnatural shadow spread across the ruins. The Vorka had arrived. The Vorka attack. From orbit, the Valkyrie sensors detected multiple incoming ships. Captain, a voice crackled through Carter's communicator. Vorka vessels have entered the system. They're heading straight for the ruins. Understood, Carter shouted back. We're getting out of here, now. But before they could make it to the entrance, a deafening screech filled the air. The Vorka had landed. Dark, twisted shapes emerged from the shadows, their red eyes glowing like burning embers. The towering mechanical beings moved unnaturally fast, their bodies shifting like liquid metal. Open fire. Rains roared. Bullets and plasma rounds tore through the air, but just as before, they did nothing. The Vorka walked through the barrage unharmed, their bodies untouched by human weapons. One of them raised its clawed hand, and a soldier vanished, erased from existence in an instant. We can't fight them, Grant shouted. We need to go. Carter clenched his jaw. He looked down at the glowing artifact in his hands. if this is a weapon. Making a split-second decision, he raised the device and focused on the Vorka. The golden energy pulsed in response. Then suddenly, a beam of light shot out from the artifact, striking the nearest Vorka. For the first time ever, the enemy screamed. The creature staggered back, its body twisting unnaturally as the golden light burned through it. Then, with a final, piercing shriek, it vanished into dust. Everyone froze. Dr. Vasquez gasped. "It works." Carter didn't hesitate. He turned to the others. "Move. Now." The team rushed out of the vault, Carter holding onto the artifact tightly. As they ran, he aimed at the advancing Vorka, unleashing bursts of golden energy. Each beam struck true, tearing through the once unstoppable creatures. They could be destroyed. But there were too many of them. For every Vorka that fell, more appeared. The shadows closed in around them. Then, from above, a deafening explosion. The Valkyries' gunships had arrived, raining down fire on the battlefield. The Vorka hesitated, as if sensing the shift in battle. That was the moment Carter and his team needed. A shuttle descended quickly, its ramp opening. "Get in," the pilot shouted over the comms. One by one, they jumped aboard. As soon as the last soldier was inside, the shuttle blasted off, racing toward the Valkyrie. Through the window, Carter saw the ruins of Epsilon 9 shrinking below them. The Vorka did not pursue. They simply stood there, watching. And then, they disappeared, just like on Ilya 7. The planet fell silent once more. And this time, there might be no escape. The command deck of the U.S. Valkyrie was filled with tension as Captain Elias Carter stood before the main display. The transmission from the United Terran Coalition High Command had just ended, leaving behind a single undeniable truth. Humanity was at war. The Vorka were no longer an unknown threat lurking in the shadows. The footage from Epsilon 9 had been transmitted across the fleet. Every soldier, every scientist, and every leader of the coalition now knew what they were up against. How did High Command respond? Commander Julia Grant asked, arms crossed. Carter exhaled. "They've ordered all available forces to regroup at Fortress 17. It's a classified military station near the galactic core. That's where we'll prepare our counterattack." Lieutenant Raines smirked. "About time we stopped running." Dr. Emily Vasquez, however, was more cautious. She placed a hand on the glowing artifact they had retrieved from Epsilon 9. "We still don't fully understand this weapon, Captain. We know it works against the Vorka, but what if there are limits? What if we don't have enough power to fight them all?" Carter nodded. He understood her concerns, but they had no choice. "We'll figure it out. Right now, we need to move." Arrival at Fortress 17. 3 days later, the Valkyrie arrived at Fortress 17, a massive space station built deep within an asteroid belt. The station was surrounded by hundreds of warships, all preparing for battle. As the Valkyrie docked, Carter and his team were escorted to a high-security briefing room. Inside, a group of top military leaders were already gathered, their faces grim. Admiral Helena Briggs, the Supreme Commander of the Coalition Forces, stepped forward. "Captain Carter, your mission to Epsilon 9 changed everything. Thanks to your team, we now have a fighting chance against the Vorka." Carter nodded. "We confirmed that the Vorka can be destroyed, but they won't sit back and let us prepare. They'll strike soon." Briggs pressed a button, and a holographic map appeared, displaying a system known as Sigma 12. "We believe this is where they will attack first," she explained. "It's one of our largest industrial colonies, producing weapons and warships for the fleet. If we lose it, we'll be crippled before the war even begins." Grant frowned. "And you think we can stop them?" Briggs turned to Carter. "We don't just want to stop them. We want to launch the first strike." The room fell silent. "You mean an offensive?" Raines asked, eyes wide. "We've never taken the fight to them before." Briggs nodded. "We have to change the way we fight. No more waiting for them to come to us. We strike first, and we strike hard. Carter glanced at the artifact in Vasquez's hands. Then we'll need to find a way to use this weapon on a larger scale. A single device won't be enough to turn the tide of war. Briggs folded her arms. That's why our top scientists are standing by. Your team will work with them to unlock its full potential. Meanwhile, we'll prepare for battle. Carter took a deep breath. The war had begun, and there was no turning back. The Battle of Sigma 12. 2 days later, the fleet was in position. Hundreds of warships, armed and ready, surrounded Sigma 12, waiting for the Vorka to arrive. Carter stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, watching the sensor feed. Status: all ships are in formation, Grant reported. Defense grids are online. We're ready. Then, without warning, the Vorka arrived. A massive tear in space opened near the planet, and from it, black, twisted ships emerged. Their hulls shimmered unnaturally, as if they were not fully part of this universe. "They're here," Rains muttered. Carter's grip on the command console tightened. All ships, fire at will. The battle began. Terran warships unleashed hell, filling space with beams of energy and streaks of missiles. Explosions rocked the void as the first wave of Vorka vessels was hit. But the enemy did not slow down. The Vorka ships moved like shadows, phasing through some of the attacks as if they weren't even real. Their own weapons fired dark energy pulses, erasing entire ships in an instant. On the Valkyrie, alarms blared. "We're losing ships fast," Grant shouted. Carter turned to Vasquez. "Is the weapon ready?" She nodded, holding the artifact. "We've modified it to work with the ship's main cannon, but we only get one shot." Carter took a deep breath. "Then we make it count. Target their flagship." The Valkyrie turned toward the largest Vorka ship. It was an enormous, floating monolith, its surface shifting like liquid darkness. "Charging weapon," Vasquez called out. The artifact glowed brighter and brighter, golden energy surging into the ship's cannon. Outside, the Vorka flagship turned toward the Valkyrie. Its hull cracked open, revealing a massive energy core, pulsing with unnatural power. "They're locking onto us," Rains yelled. Carter didn't hesitate. "Fire." The ship's main cannon unleashed a golden beam, infused with the power of the artifact. The beam struck the Vorka flagship head-on. For the first time ever, a Vorka warship screamed. The flagship twisted and convulsed, its dark hull melting away, unable to resist the light. A shockwave erupted from its core, and in an instant, the entire ship was obliterated. The remaining Vorka forces froze. Their shadowy forms flickered, as if they had suddenly lost their connection to reality. Then, they vanished. All of them. The battle was over. A stunned silence filled the Valkyrie. Then, the fleet's communication channels erupted in cheers. "We did it," Vasquez whispered. "We actually did it." Carter exhaled. This was just the beginning. Now we know they can be beaten. Grant turned to him. "But they also know we have this weapon. They won't stop until they destroy it." Carter nodded, looking at the empty void where the Vorka had disappeared. "They'll be back." But this time, humanity was ready. The victory at Sigma 12 had given humanity hope, but Captain Elias Carter knew the war was far from over. The Vorka would not retreat forever. They would return, stronger, more determined, and more dangerous than ever before. On the bridge of the U.S. Valkyrie, Carter stood with his team, watching the aftermath of the battle unfold on the holographic display. Wreckage from both Terran and Vorka ships floated in space, a grim reminder of the cost of war. "We destroyed their flagship," Commander Julia Grant said, crossing her arms. "But we both know this isn't the end." Dr. Emily Vasquez nodded. She held the glowing artifact, the only known weapon capable of truly harming the Vorka. "If they'd regroup and attack again, we might not be so lucky next time." Lieutenant Rains exhaled, shaking his head. "They always come back. We need to end this for good." Carter clenched his fists. He had already made his decision. We take the fight to them. No more waiting. No more running. He pointed at the star map, zooming in on a distant system. This is where the Vorka homeworld is. We strike first, and we wipe them out before they can do the same to us. The room fell silent. The idea of attacking the Vorka at their source was insane, but it was their only chance. Admiral Helena Briggs appeared on the holoscreen from Fortress 17. Her expression was serious. "Captain Carter, are you certain about this?" Carter nodded. "We don't have a choice, Admiral. If we wait, they'll recover and come back stronger. We need to finish this war now." Briggs exhaled, then gave a sharp nod. "Very well. You'll have the full support of the fleet. But be warned, no one has ever seen their homeworld and survived." Carter smirked. "Then we'll be the first." The invasion of the Vorka homeworld. 2 days later, the largest human fleet ever assembled arrived at the edge of the Vorka's territory. Hundreds of warships, battle cruisers, and gunships prepared for the final battle. The Vorka homeworld loomed ahead, a massive dark planet surrounded by unnatural storms. Strange energy flickered across its surface, as if the entire world was alive. Carter stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, staring at the enemy planet. "This is it," he said. "We end it here." Then, the Vorka appeared. A massive rift tore open in space, and from it, thousands of Vorka warships emerged. Their dark, shifting forms blocked out the stars, surrounding the Terran fleet. "They were waiting for us," Grant muttered. Carter didn't hesitate. "All ships, attack." The final battle began. Terran ships opened fire, unleashing everything they had. Missiles, energy beams, and railgun rounds streaked across space, colliding with the Vorka forces. Explosions lit up the darkness, but the enemy did not falter. The Vorka retaliated, their ships moving like shadows, dodging attacks and erasing human warships with deadly energy blasts. On the Valkyrie, alarms blared. "Shields at 40%. A crew member shouted. Carter turned to Vasquez. "We need to use the artifact. Now." Vasquez nodded, rushing to the main weapons console. She placed the artifact into the ship's energy core. Immediately, the entire ship began to glow with golden light. "Weapon is charged," Vasquez called out. Carter pointed at the Vorka mothership, a massive fortress floating above the dark planet. "Target their command ship." The Valkyrie fired. A beam of golden energy erupted from the ship, cutting through space and striking the Vorka mothership. The effect was instant. The entire mothership trembled, its dark surface cracking apart as golden energy tore through it. The Vorka forces screamed, their ships flickering and breaking apart as if their very existence was being erased. But the mothership was not finished yet. A final desperate shockwave burst from the dying vessel, sending a pulse of darkness across the battlefield. Ships were torn apart, flames erupting in every direction. Inside the Valkyrie, the crew was thrown to the ground. "Hull damage critical," Grant shouted. Carter grabbed onto the console. "Did we destroy them?" The view screen flickered, and then suddenly, the Vorka fleet was gone. Every single enemy ship had vanished. The mothership crumbled, its remains falling into the dark planet below. The storms vanished, and the unnatural energy that had surrounded the world faded away. The Vorka were gone. Silence filled the bridge. Then, a voice came through the comms. "This is Admiral Briggs," she said. "The Vorka, they're defeated." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, cheers erupted across the fleet. The war was over. A new era. 1 week later, back at Fortress 17, the fleet returned victorious. Across the galaxy, celebrations erupted as humanity realized what had happened. They had won. On the bridge of the Valkyrie, Carter stood with his team, looking out into space. "We did it," Rains said with a grin. "We actually did it." Grant smirked. "We didn't just survive. We proved that humanity is strong, that we will never back down." Vasquez looked at the artifact, now dark and lifeless. The weapon's power is gone. Whatever it was, it only had one purpose: to destroy the Vorka. Carter nodded. He turned to his crew. The war is over, but we're not just survivors anymore. He looked out at the stars, his heart filled with pride. We are the defenders of this galaxy now. And if any new threat ever rises, he clenched his fist, humanity will be ready. As the Valkyrie soared into the unknown, a new era began, one where humans would no longer fear the darkness, because this time they were the light.